For a closer look, we're joined, as we often are, by Cornell Brooks. He's the former president of the NAACP and a professor at Harvard Kennedy School, and we've reached him in Manassas, Virginia. Professor Brooks, thank you again for being on the show. As you have watched the killing of George Floyd and the protests in the streets, what's your reaction?
My reaction is, first, grief over the killing of another black man amidst the killing of so many black people all across this country. When a young black man is 21 times more likely to be killed by the police than his white counterparts, we have a pandemic of police misconduct. But where we have protests and demonstrations, many of which have turned violent, the violence that has been targeted on and directed at black people is being turned on us in terms of protests and demonstrations. Meaning, when you engage in violence that destroys cities which are emblematic of black progress, Washington and Atlanta, but certainly Minneapolis, it hurts us. And so I have grief at the loss of black life, any life, all life. But we got to be clear about this, John. We have those in power who are encouraging the violence by their actions and inactions. And what I mean by that is, when the government of the U.S., when there's a threat to the economy, we can move in a matter of minutes and days to address the problem. When it comes to the taking of life as opposed to the taking of property, we come up with more commissions, more excuses, more rationalizations for permitting, tolerating, and even encouraging police misconduct and police brutality.
This is an issue that is obviously seizing America now and has for arguably generations. But there is an awareness throughout the West, in Canada, even in the UK and in Europe, that there are problems, serious problems between those who are outside of the mainstream and authorities who are empowered to maintain order. How does our culture, and I mean Western culture, take those steps to try to heal that rift and to elevate everyone who is involved in these often deadly confrontations?
I think it's critically important for us to appreciate the fact that we can address and solve this problem. What I mean by that is, certainly in the United States, the lynchings that took place all across the South and indeed the country in the last century and the century before last, we brought to an end. The form of lynching that we call police misconduct and police brutality, we can bring to an end. But it means we have to address it with a sense of urgency. John, let's be clear about this. If Canadians in Quebec understood that those in Saskatchewan and Ontario were 21 times more likely to be killed than Canadians elsewhere, they would address the problem with a sense of urgency. We have to be clear. Only a year or so ago, the U.S. passed a $1.3 trillion tax cut for corporate America. We did that in days. But when it comes to police misconduct, we have to act as though we have minutes as opposed to generations to spare. We can do that. We do it in so many other ways, and young people have taken the lesson that when you threaten property, there's a response. When you take lives, there's not a response.
The police community, I'm going to assume, and jump in here, but I'm going to assume they have to be part of the solution. This officer, disciplined multiple times, now charged with murder. Yeah, jump right in. Go ahead.
That's exactly it. You have Officer Derek Chauvin, who was charged as in complaint against 18 times, and yet he's on the street. And so we have zero tolerance for the minor and imaginary crimes of people of color, particularly black people in this country, on the street and in their homes. But when it comes to police misconduct, we have maximum tolerance. So the point being here is the police have to take the lead on this, meaning we cannot ask young demonstrators to put their bodies on the line when police won't put their badges, their oaths, their uniforms, their profession on the line. We have federal legislation in the Congress which has not moved. We have the Fraternal Order of Police, which comes up with every excuse, every rationalization to explain their inaction on police misconduct. The point being here is, if you want peace, seek justice. And if you want to stop violence in the streets, we have to move with a sense of urgency in our state legislatures, in our city councils, in the federal Congress, and certainly in the U.S. This has to take on a sense of urgency. Literally, last year, there were only 27 days in which a person was not killed by the police in this country. Every year, between 900 and 1,000 people die. And that's more than a shame, more than a statistic. It is a testament of the degree to which we value or don't value human life. That can change. And we have the capacity to do it.
In the short term, don't need to remind you, we have a worldwide pandemic. 100,000 plus Americans have died. The economy effectively frozen in time. And people taking to the streets right across the United States, not only doing damage, but creating unrest and also potentially spreading COVID-19 by their close proximity. So what do we do? And I understand absolutely what you're saying about the legislative process and the accountability needed by police. What do we do immediately in the coming hours to make the streets safer for citizens to be able to try to move forward?
Well, what we have to do is do what has been done when it comes to the security of our cities. Whenever the security of the cities is threatened, we bring out the National Guard. What we have to do here is immediately move on pending legislation in Congress, in state legislatures all across the country. We have to hold accountable those who have engaged in police misconduct, which means we can't arrest protesters in minutes and take months to arrest or not arrest police officers. My point being here is we can move as a matter of policy. We have to move as a matter of accountability in terms of arrests and prosecutions. And we literally have to demonstrate to the public that we're going to take this problem not merely seriously, but urgently. Why? Because the economy and the health of this country hangs in the balance. Meaning, if people are in the streets, they're not in their homes. And many of them will soon end up in the hospital as a consequence of these protests and demonstrations where so many people are not socially distanced, but they're morally close to the problem.
Cornell Brooks, thank you as always for your candor and your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cornell Brooks, professor at the Harvard Kennedy School, and he spoke to us from Manassas, Virginia.